The morning sun painted the grand mansion in golden light as Maria stepped through the servants' entrance for the first time. Her worn shoes clicked softly against the marble floors as she followed Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, through corridors lined with expensive paintings and crystal chandeliers. "You'll be responsible for the East Wing," Mrs. Henderson explained, her voice echoing in the vast hallway. "That includes the family's private quarters and Miss Isabella's room. The master and mistress travel frequently for business, so you'll primarily be caring for their daughter." Maria nodded, clutching her small bag of belongings. At 25, she had worked in many wealthy homes, but none quite like this. The Sterling mansion was more like a palace, with its towering ceilings and endless rooms filled with treasures from around the world. "Tell me about the daughter," Maria asked as they climbed a sweeping staircase. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew somber. "Miss Isabella is 8 years old. She's different. The poor child hasn't spoken a word since birth. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with her voice box or hearing, but she simply doesn't speak." They reached the second floor, and Mrs. Henderson led Maria down another hallway decorated with family portraits. Maria noticed that in every painting, a beautiful young girl with dark curls and piercing blue eyes stood silently beside her well-dressed parents. "The family has tried everything," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Speech therapists, specialists from around the world, even alternative treatments. Nothing has worked. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling have almost given up hope." Maria felt a pang of sympathy. "How does she communicate?" "She's learned some sign language, though her parents don't always understand it. Mostly, she points or writes simple words. She's incredibly intelligent, perhaps more so than other children her age, but the silence." Mrs. Henderson shook her head sadly. They stopped outside a door painted soft lavender. Mrs. Henderson knocked gently. "Miss Isabella? Your new caretaker is here to meet you." The door opened slowly, revealing a small girl with the most expressive eyes Maria had ever seen. Isabella wore a pristine white dress with blue ribbons, her dark hair pulled back in perfect curls. She looked up at Maria with curiosity, tilting her head slightly. Maria knelt down to the girl's eye level. "Hello, Isabella. My name is Maria. I'm very happy to meet you." Isabella studied Maria's face intently, then turned to a small chalkboard mounted on her wall. She wrote in careful letters, "Are you nice?" Maria smiled warmly. "I try to be. Are you?" Isabella's lips curved into the faintest smile. She erased her message and wrote, "Sometimes." Mrs. Henderson looked surprised. She doesn't usually respond to strangers so quickly. Perhaps this is a good sign. She checked her pocket watch. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted. Maria, Miss Isabella's schedule is on her desk. Breakfast is at 8, lessons with her tutor at 10, lunch at noon, and free time in the afternoon. Dinner is at 6 when the family is home." After Mrs. Henderson left, Maria looked around Isabella's room. It was every little girl's dream: pink walls, a four-poster bed with lace curtains, shelves lined with dolls and books, and a play area with a miniature tea set. Yet despite all the luxury, there was something lonely about the space. Isabella wrote on her chalkboard again, "Do you talk a lot?" "Only when I have something important to say," Maria replied honestly. "Do you like quiet?" Isabella nodded vigorously, then pointed to a bookshelf. Maria walked over and saw hundreds of books, from picture stories to advanced novels that seemed far beyond an 8-year-old's reading level. "You like to read?" Maria asked. Isabella nodded again and pulled out a thick book about ocean creatures. She opened it to a page showing whales and pointed excitedly. "You like whales?" Maria sat on the floor beside her. "I've never seen one in real life, but I've heard they sing to each other across the ocean. Even underwater, they find ways to communicate." Isabella's eyes widened. She wrote quickly, "They talk without words too?" "In their own special way," Maria said softly. "Just like you do." For the first time, Isabella's smile reached her eyes. She closed the book and gestured for Maria to follow her to the window. The view overlooked vast gardens with fountains and perfectly trimmed hedges. In the distance, Maria could see the Sterling family's private lake. Isabella pointed to different areas of the garden, then, to her chalkboard. She drew simple pictures, a tree, a flower, a bird, and labeled each one. Maria realized the child was giving her a tour of her favorite places. "Would you like to show me the garden after your lessons today?" Maria asked. Isabella nodded enthusiastically and wrote, "The maze is my secret place." "You have a secret place? How wonderful. Everyone needs somewhere special that's just theirs." The morning flew by as Maria helped Isabella get ready for her tutoring session. She noticed that the child was incredibly organized and independent, laying out her own clothes and books without being asked. When the tutor arrived, a stern-looking woman named Miss Powell, Isabella's demeanor changed completely. She became withdrawn and mechanical, following instructions but showing none of the curiosity and life Maria had witnessed earlier. During the lesson, Maria observed from the corner of the room. Miss Powell taught mathematics and literature using traditional methods, asking Isabella to write answers on paper. The child completed every task perfectly, but there was no joy in her learning. When Miss Powell praised her work, Isabella simply nodded without expression. After the tutor left, Isabella slumped in her chair, looking exhausted. "Learning shouldn't make you tired like that," Maria said gently. "What subjects do you really enjoy?" Isabella perked up and led Maria to a closet. Inside were art supplies, musical instruments, and science experiment kits, all barely used. She picked up a paintbrush and looked at it longingly. "When did you last paint?" Maria asked. Isabella held up 3 fingers, then wrote, "Months ago." "Too messy for mother." Maria felt a stab of sadness. "What if we painted outside? The mess wouldn't matter there." Isabella's eyes lit up, but then she shook her head and wrote, "Not allowed without permission." "Then, we'll ask permission," Maria said firmly. "Every child should be able to paint if they want to." They went down to lunch, which Isabella ate alone in the large dining room. The massive table could seat 20 people, but the little girl sat at one end with her perfectly prepared meal, looking very small and isolated. Maria sat nearby, not eating but keeping Isabella company. "Do your parents eat with you when they're home?" Maria asked. Isabella shrugged and wrote, "Sometimes. They talk business. I listen." "What about friends? Do children from the neighborhood visit?" Isabella shook her head and wrote, "Mother says I'm too different. It would be awkward." Maria's heart ached for this lonely child. She made a mental note to speak with Mrs. Sterling about Isabella's social isolation when the family returned from their business trip. After lunch, Isabella led Maria through the gardens as promised. The grounds were spectacular, with roses, lavender, and jasmine creating a symphony of colors and scents. Isabella moved through the paths with the confidence of someone who had explored every inch of the space. They reached the maze Isabella had mentioned, a complex puzzle of tall hedges with a fountain at the center. Isabella navigated it easily, clearly having memorized the path. At the center, she had created her own small sanctuary. There were cushions hidden behind a bench, along with a few books and a journal. "This is where you come to think?" Maria asked. Isabella nodded and opened her journal. The pages were filled with drawings, incredible detailed sketches of flowers, animals, and people. Some showed her parents in their business clothes, always looking busy and distant. Others depicted scenes from her books or her imagination. "Isabella, these are beautiful," Maria said, genuinely amazed. "You're a real artist." Isabella blushed and wrote, "No one ever looks at them." "Well, I'm looking now, and I think you have a wonderful gift. Have you ever shown these to your parents?" Isabella shook her head quickly and wrote, "They're too busy for pictures." Maria studied the drawings more carefully. Many showed Isabella herself, always alone or standing apart from others. In one particularly poignant sketch, she had drawn herself behind glass, with people on the other side pointing and talking. "How do you feel when people look at you like you're different?" Maria asked carefully. Isabella thought for a long moment, then wrote, "Like I'm broken. Like everyone wishes I was normal." "You're not broken," Maria said firmly. "You're just Isabella. And Isabella is perfectly fine exactly as she is." Tears welled up in Isabella's eyes, the first real emotion Maria had seen her express freely. She quickly wiped them away and wrote, "Father says I embarrass the family at parties. People stare. People stare because they don't understand," Maria explained. "But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Some of the most interesting people in history were considered different by others." Isabella looked skeptical, so Maria continued. "Have you heard of Helen Keller? She couldn't see or hear, but she learned to communicate and became one of the most famous writers in the world. Or Einstein? He didn't speak until he was 4 years old, and people thought he wasn't very smart. But he grew up to be a brilliant scientist." Isabella wrote, "Really? They were different too?" "Very different. And the world is better because of who they were, not despite it." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the maze, with Maria asking Isabella about her drawings and encouraging her to explain them. Though Isabella couldn't speak aloud, she was remarkably expressive through her art and writing. She showed Maria sketches of dreams she'd had, stories she'd imagined, and feelings she couldn't put into words any other way. As the sun began to set, they returned to the house. Isabella seemed more relaxed and happy than she had been all day. She even attempted to hum softly as they walked, the first sound Maria had heard her make. At dinner time, Mrs. Henderson informed them that Mr. and Mrs. Sterling had called to say they would be staying in the city for another week. Isabella received this news without visible reaction, but Maria noticed her shoulders slump slightly. "Would you like to eat in your room tonight?" Maria suggested. "We could have a picnic on the floor and look at more of your books." Isabella nodded eagerly and wrote, "Like camping?" "Exactly like camping. We can even tell stories." They set up blankets on Isabella's bedroom floor and ate their dinner while sharing tales. Maria told Isabella about her own childhood in a small village, about helping her grandmother tend to injured animals, and about the first time she saw the ocean. Isabella listened intently, occasionally writing questions or comments. When Maria asked if she wanted to share a story, Isabella hesitated, then went to her closet and pulled out a small notebook. She wrote, "I write stories sometimes. But they're probably silly." "I'd love to hear one of your stories," Maria said encouragingly. Isabella flipped through the notebook and found a story she'd written about a mermaid who lived in an underwater palace but dreamed of flying like the birds she could see from beneath the waves. As Maria read it aloud, she was struck by the beautiful imagery and emotional depth of Isabella's writing. "Isabella, this is wonderful," Maria said when she finished. "You're not just an artist, you're a storyteller too." Isabella beamed and wrote, "It feels good when someone listens to my stories." "Everyone needs someone to listen to their stories," Maria agreed. "Would you like to tell me more tomorrow?" Isabella nodded enthusiastically, then yawned. As Maria helped her get ready for bed, Isabella wrote one more message on her chalkboard: "Thank you for not trying to make me talk." "Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me in your own way," Maria replied. As Isabella settled into bed, Maria dimmed the lights and sat in the chair beside her. "Would you like me to read to you?" Isabella shook her head and pointed to her own lips, then to Maria's ears. She wanted to read to Maria in her own silent way. Isabella opened one of her favorite books and began pointing to the pictures, using gestures and facial expressions to tell the story. Maria followed along, occasionally asking questions or making comments. It was one of the most creative storytelling sessions Maria had ever experienced. When the story ended, Isabella looked more peaceful than Maria had seen her all day. As she drifted off to sleep, Maria couldn't help but think that this remarkable child had so much to offer the world, if only someone would take the time to truly listen to her unique voice. Maria quietly left the room and made her way to her own small quarters in the servants' wing. As she prepared for bed, she reflected on her first day with Isabella. The child was clearly intelligent, creative, and emotionally deep. Her silence wasn't a barrier to communication, it was simply a different language that no one had bothered to learn. She thought about Isabella's drawings, particularly the one showing herself behind glass. How lonely must it be to feel so isolated, even in your own family? Maria was determined to help Isabella feel less alone, but she sensed there were deeper issues at play. Why was such a brilliant child being hidden away? Why did her own parents seem embarrassed by her differences? As Maria fell asleep, she made herself a promise. She would not only care for Isabella, she would advocate for her, encourage her talents, and help her find her place in a world that seemed determined to see her as broken rather than simply different. What Maria didn't know was that Isabella lay awake in her own room, staring at the ceiling with a small smile on her face. For the first time in her young life, someone had seen her not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be understood. It was a feeling she had only dreamed about, and now that she had tasted it, she never wanted it to go away. The mansion settled into quiet as both the maid and the silent daughter slept, neither knowing that their meeting would change both their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But sometimes the most profound connections begin with the simplest recognition that every person, regardless of how they communicate, has a voice worth hearing. 3 weeks had passed since Maria began caring for Isabella, and a beautiful routine had developed between them. Each morning, Maria would find Isabella already awake, sitting by her window with a new drawing or story to share. The child had blossomed under Maria's patient attention, becoming more expressive and confident each day. On this particular morning, Isabella greeted Maria with an excited wave and quickly wrote on her chalkboard, "I dreamed about whales again. They were singing a song just for me." What did their song sound like? Maria asked, settling beside Isabella's desk. Isabella closed her eyes and began to move her hands in flowing, graceful motions, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Her face was serene and focused, completely absorbed in translating the music only she could hear into movement. "That's beautiful," Maria whispered. "You can hear the whale songs in your dreams?" Isabella nodded and wrote, "Sometimes I hear music everywhere. In the wind, in the water fountains, even in people's footsteps. But I can only show it with my hands." Maria was fascinated by this revelation. Over the past weeks, she had noticed Isabella's unusual sensitivity to sounds and rhythms. The child would often pause during their walks to listen to things others might miss: the pattern of raindrops on leaves, the rhythm of horses' hooves on the distant road, or the melody of birds singing in harmony. "Have you ever tried to make music yourself?" Maria asked. Isabella's expression grew sad. She wrote, "Mother hired a piano teacher last year. He got frustrated because I wouldn't sing scales. He said I wasn't trying hard enough. What if we tried making music in your own way? Without singing or speaking?" Isabella looked intrigued but hesitant. She led Maria to the corner of her room where a beautiful grand piano sat covered with a dust cloth. Clearly, no one had touched it in months. "May I?" Maria asked, gesturing to the piano bench. Isabella nodded, and Maria sat down to play a simple melody. As the notes filled the room, Isabella's entire body seemed to come alive. She swayed with the music, her hands moving expressively, her face glowing with joy. When Maria finished, Isabella applauded silently, then sat beside her on the bench. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The music that emerged was unlike anything Maria had ever heard, not a traditional song, but a flowing, emotional composition that seemed to capture feelings rather than follow conventional structure. "Isabella, that's incredible," Maria breathed. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Isabella wrote quickly, "I listened to the music inside the piano and let my fingers find it." "The music inside the piano?" Isabella nodded seriously and wrote, "Every piano has its own voice. This one sounds like silver bells mixed with rain. The library piano sounds like deep ocean waves." Maria was amazed by Isabella's unique way of experiencing and creating music. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" Isabella shook her head and wrote, "They want me to play their songs, not mine." It was becoming clear to Maria that Isabella's gifts had been consistently misunderstood and discouraged by those around her. The child had her own language, through art, music, movement, and written words, but everyone insisted she communicate in conventional ways. Their musical morning was interrupted by Mrs. Henderson's knock. "Miss Isabella, your parents have returned early from their trip. They'd like to see you in the drawing room in 10 minutes. Isabella's joyful expression immediately faded. She quickly covered the piano and smoothed her dress, transforming from the creative, expressive child Maria knew into the quiet, withdrawn daughter her parents expected. In the drawing room, Richard and Elizabeth Sterling sat on an elegant sofa, still dressed in their traveling clothes. Richard was a tall, imposing man with graying temples and a serious demeanor. Elizabeth was beautiful but cold, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothing that screamed wealth and status. "Isabella," Elizabeth said without warmth, "come here and let us look at you." Isabella walked slowly to stand before her parents, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes downcast. "Has she been behaving herself?" Richard asked Maria, as if Isabella weren't standing right there. "She's been wonderful," Maria replied. "She's very intelligent and creative. Perhaps you'd like to see some of her artwork or hear about her." "That won't be necessary," Elizabeth interrupted. "We're more concerned with practical matters. Has there been any progress with her speech?" Maria glanced at Isabella, who had gone completely still. "Isabella communicates beautifully in her own ways. She's very expressive through." "We didn't ask about her other methods," Richard said curtly. "We asked about speech. That's what matters for her future." "Richard," Elizabeth said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss Dr. Whitmore's suggestion privately." Isabella looked up sharply at the mention of this name, fear flashing in her eyes. "Who is Dr. Whitmore?" Maria asked. "A specialist who deals with challenging cases like Isabella's," Elizabeth explained. "He has a facility where children with severe communication disorders can receive intensive treatment." "You mean an institution?" Maria's voice carried more alarm than she intended. "A treatment center," Richard corrected firmly. "Dr. Whitmore believes that Isabella's refusal to speak is willful defiance. He thinks that removing her from her comfortable environment might motivate her to overcome this stubbornness." Isabella had gone pale. She looked desperately at Maria, then grabbed her chalkboard and wrote frantically, "Please don't send me away." Elizabeth sighed. "See how she manipulates with those dramatic displays? Dr. Whitmore says this is exactly the behavior that needs to be corrected." "She's not being manipulative," Maria said, struggling to keep her voice calm. "She's afraid. Any child would be afraid of being sent away from home." "The decision isn't yours to make," Richard said coldly. "We've scheduled an evaluation with Dr. Whitmore next week. If he recommends residential treatment, that's what will happen." Isabella dropped her chalkboard and ran from the room. Maria started to follow, but Elizabeth stopped her. "Let her go. These emotional outbursts are exactly what Dr. Whitmore warned us about. She needs to learn that tantrums won't get her what she wants." Maria felt sick to her stomach. "Mrs. Sterling, Isabella isn't having tantrums. She's a sensitive, intelligent child who just needs understanding, and what she needs," Richard interrupted, "is to learn to function in the real world. We've indulged her differences long enough. She's 8 years old and has never spoken a single word. Do you think that's normal? Do you think we can send her to school like this? Introduce her in society?" "Some children develop differently," Maria said carefully. "Isabella has so many gifts. Her art, her music, her writing, none of which will help her in life if she can't speak," Elizabeth said dismissively. "We want her to have friends, to marry well someday, to represent our family appropriately. How can she do any of that if she remains mute?" Maria wanted to argue that Isabella could do all those things in her own way, but she could see that the Sterlings had already made up their minds. They saw their daughter as a problem to be fixed, not a person to be understood. "I'd like to check on Isabella now," Maria said. "Fine. But remember, you're here to serve our family's needs, not to encourage Isabella's peculiarities." Maria found Isabella in her secret spot in the maze, curled up on her cushions and crying silently. When she saw Maria approaching, she threw herself into the maid's arms. "Shoo," Maria whispered, holding her close. "I'm here. You're safe."
Isabella pulled back and wrote shakily, "They want to send me away because I'm broken."
You are not broken, Maria said firmly. You're different, and that's not the same thing.
Isabella wrote, "What if Dr. Whitmore is right? What if I could talk but I just won't? Do you feel like you're choosing not to speak?" Isabella shook her head vigorously and wrote, "The words get stuck. They're in my mind but they can't come out. It's like there's a wall."
Then, you're not being stubborn or defiant.
You're just, you. Isabella wrote, "Tell me about the whale songs again." Maria understood.
Isabella needed to remember that there were different ways to communicate, that her silence didn't make her less valuable.
"Whales sing across hundreds of miles of ocean," Maria began.
Their songs are so deep and complex that scientists are still trying to understand them. Some whales sing the same song for months, changing it slightly each time, like they're composing a symphony. They don't use words like we do, but they share their thoughts, their locations, their emotions.
Isabella listened intently, then wrote, "Do you think my parents would love me more if I could sing like the whales?" Maria's heart broke at the question. "Oh, Isabella. Real love doesn't have conditions.
You shouldn't have to change who you are to deserve love."
"But what if they really send me away?"
"I won't let that happen without a fight," Maria promised, though she wasn't sure how she could keep such a promise. They spent the afternoon in Isabella's room, working on art projects and reading together. Maria noticed that Isabella was more withdrawn than usual, the joy and confidence of recent weeks dampened by her parents' return. That evening, Maria overheard Richard and Elizabeth discussing Isabella's future. "Dr. Whitmore's success rate is impressive," Elizabeth was saying.
60% of his patients begin speaking within the first year. And the other 40%? Continue receiving treatment until they improve. He's very thorough. What about cost? Money isn't the issue, Richard. Our reputation is. Every social event we attend, people ask about Isabella.
They whisper about the sterling child who can't speak.
It's becoming embarrassing. Perhaps residential treatment is the answer then. At least if she's away receiving help, people will assume we're addressing the problem." Maria clenched her fists, horrified by their callousness.
They were discussing sending their daughter away not because they thought it would help her, but because her presence embarrassed them. The next morning, Isabella was listless and sad. She barely touched her breakfast and showed no interest in their usual activities. When Miss Powell arrived for tutoring, Isabella mechanically completed her assignments but with none of her usual precision.
After the tutor left, Maria made a decision. "Isabella, would you like to visit the library in town today? I think a change of scenery might help."
Isabella looked surprised but nodded. They rarely left the estate, and Isabella had never been to a public library. The town library was a cozy, welcoming place filled with books and comfortable reading nooks. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, was a kind woman in her 60s who immediately took to Isabella.
"What kind of books do you enjoy, dear?" Mrs. Chen asked. Isabella looked at Maria uncertainly.
She had never been asked directly about her preferences by a stranger.
"Isabella loves stories about ocean creatures and fantasy adventures," Maria said.
"She's also a wonderful artist and musician."
"Really? We have a children's art group that meets here on Saturdays.
And our local children's choir practices in the community room.
Would you be interested?" Isabella's eyes lit up, but then she looked worried. She wrote on a small notepad, "I can't sing." Mrs. Chen read the note without judgment. "Oh, that's perfectly fine. Not everyone in the choir sings.
We have children who play instruments, some who help with music sheets, and others who simply enjoy listening and learning about music.
There's a place for everyone." Isabella looked amazed.
Here was an adult who didn't see her silence as a problem to be solved, but simply accepted it as part of who she was.
They spent hours in the library.
Isabella discovered books she had never seen, and Mrs. Chin showed her the art supplies available for the children's programs.
When other children came in for after-school reading time, several approached Isabella with friendly curiosity. "Are you new here?" asked a girl about Isabella's age. Isabella nodded and wrote, "I'm visiting with my friend Maria." "Cool handwriting," the girl said, reading over Isabella's shoulder. "I'm Sarah. Want to see the puppet theater? We're practicing for a show next week."
Isabella looked to Maria for permission, and Maria nodded encouragingly.
Isabella spent the next hour watching the puppet rehearsal, occasionally writing suggestions or questions for the other children.
They included her naturally, asking for her opinions and showing her how the puppets worked. "You should come to our show next week," Sarah said. "We could use help with the backdrop."
"I saw your drawings, you're really good." Isabella glowed with pride and acceptance.
For the first time in her life, she was part of a group of children who valued her contributions.
On the drive home, Isabella wrote, "Why can't my parents see me the way Mrs. Chen and the other children do?"
"Sometimes people who are closest to us have the hardest time seeing who we really are," Maria said gently.
"They get stuck on who they think we should be." "Will you tell them about the library? About the children who liked my drawings?" Maria nodded. "I'll try, Isabella. But I need you to know that no matter what happens, you are wonderful exactly as you are."
That evening, Maria requested a meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. She told them about their visit to the library, about Isabella's positive interactions with other children, and about the programs that could help Isabella develop socially while honoring her unique communication style.
"A public library?"
Elizabeth said with disgust.
"Absolutely not. We can't have Isabella mixing with random children from town."
"Those children accepted her immediately," Maria argued. "They didn't see her silence as a problem."
"Because they're children," Richard said dismissively. "Adults in the real world won't be so tolerant." "But what if the real world includes more people like Mrs. Chen and those children? What if Isabella's differences could be seen as strengths rather than problems?" "This conversation is over," Elizabeth said firmly. "Dr. Whitmore's evaluation is scheduled for Monday. That's final."
As Maria walked back to her quarters that night, she made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't stand by and watch Isabella be sent away to have her spirit broken. Somehow, she had to find a way to protect this remarkable child and help her parents see the truth about their daughter's extraordinary gifts. What Maria didn't know was that Isabella had been listening at her bedroom door and had heard every word of the conversation. As she climbed into bed that night, Isabella made her own decision. She would find a way to show everyone that she wasn't broken, she was just different. And, sometimes, being different was exactly what the world needed. The weekend before Dr. Whitmore's scheduled evaluation arrived like a storm cloud over the Sterling mansion. Isabella had become increasingly withdrawn, barely eating and spending most of her time staring out her bedroom window. Maria tried everything she could think of to lift the child's spirits, but the shadow of Monday's appointment loomed over them both. On Saturday morning, Maria found Isabella sitting at her desk, not drawing or writing as usual, but simply holding a photograph. It was a picture of her with her parents from her 6th birthday, one of the few photos where the family looked genuinely happy together.
"You miss them, don't you?" Maria asked softly. "The way they used to be with you?" Isabella nodded and wrote, "Before they gave up on me." "When did that change? When did they stop trying to understand you?"
Isabella thought for a long moment, then went to her closet and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were more photographs, cards, and mementos from earlier in her life. She showed Maria pictures of her 2nd and 3rd birthdays, where her parents looked hopeful and loving despite Isabella's silence. "Look at this," Isabella wrote, pointing to a photo of herself at age 4 with a woman in a white coat. "Dr. Martinez. She was nice. What happened to Dr. Martinez?" Isabella's expression darkened. She showed Maria another photo, this one of her parents looking frustrated and tired after what appeared to be a medical appointment. "They got angry when Dr. Martinez said I might never speak," Isabella wrote. "They fired her and found Dr. Patterson, then Dr. Hughes, then Dr. Sampson.
Each doctor promised to fix me. And, when they couldn't, my parents got more and more disappointed. Now they don't even look at me the same way. Maria studied the progression of photographs. In the early pictures, Richard and Elizabeth looked at Isabella with love and wonder, despite their obvious frustration with her silence. But, as the years passed and the failed treatments mounted, their expressions grew colder, more distant, more ashamed. They love you, Maria said carefully. But, they've forgotten how to show it because they're so focused on changing you. What if Dr. Whitmore can fix me? What if I really could talk and I'm just being stubborn like father says? Isabella, look at me. Maria took her hands gently. I've watched you try to speak. I've seen the frustration on your face when words won't come. You're not being stubborn. Your brain just works differently, and that's not something that needs to be fixed. Isabella looked uncertain, so Maria continued. Tell me about your earliest memory of trying to speak. Isabella closed her eyes, concentrating. After a long moment, she wrote, I was very little. Maybe 3. I wanted to tell Mother I loved her. The words were so clear in my head. I could hear them perfectly. But, when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I tried so hard that I started crying. What did your mother do? She hugged me and said it was okay, that the words would come someday. She looked so hopeful. And, now? Now she looks at me like I'm a puzzle she's tired of trying to solve. Maria felt tears prick her eyes. This beautiful, intelligent child had been carrying the weight of her parents' disappointment for years, believing that their love was conditional on her ability to speak. Isabella, I want to try something different today. Something that might help your parents understand you better. Isabella looked curious but wary. I want to document everything wonderful about you. Your art, your music, your stories, your unique way of seeing the world. Not to change you, but to show them who you really are. Isabella brightened slightly. Like a book about me? Exactly. A book that shows all your gifts, all the ways you do communicate, all the beauty you bring to the world. They spent the morning gathering Isabella's artwork from around her room. Maria was amazed at the collection, hundreds of drawings, paintings, and sketches that revealed not just artistic talent, but deep emotional intelligence and unique perspectives on the world. One series of drawings particularly caught Maria's attention. They showed the same garden scene painted in different emotional colors, happiness rendered in bright yellows and pinks, sadness in deep blues and grays, anger in sharp reds and blacks, peace in soft greens and purples. How do you see emotions in colors? Maria asked. Isabella wrote excitedly, everyone has color feelings. When you're happy, you blow gold around the edges. When Mrs. Henderson is worried, she has gray clouds around her shoulders. Mother is always surrounded by sharp silver lines, like she's trying to keep everything perfect.